This morning I intend to discuss two ideas that might sound like they contradict each other, but that describe, in my mind at least, a lot about where our thoughts and identity as a church should be. The first idea is that you should care about what you believe, and that matters of belief are very important in determining how you should live and how you do live. The second idea is that how we agree to live and move forward together doesn't rely solely on what you do believe. In other words, matters of belief are critically important for self-understanding and self-knowledge, but they do not necessarily need to hold a bearing on understanding ourselves as a group. Beginning with belief. Earlier this month, I spoke at some length about how Unitarian Universalism is non-creedal. Unlike most denominations, which are defined by a common shared dogma and hence a set of beliefs, our church explicitly disallows using creedal tests or standards as a criterion for membership. In the absence of such church-supplied dogma, each of you thinking and discerning individuals, are therefore expected to assume responsibility for figuring stuff out. You might do this on your own. You might by basing conclusions on observation, reason, and intuition. You might accept teachings from other religious traditions. You may rely on collective learning and science. But however you arrive at your own conclusions, you are always encouraged to share them with others, compare thoughts, and revise and modify your own beliefs as you see fit. What you believe is important. It frames your worldview and your understanding of how you fit into the cosmos and what you feel is important in life. I'll put out a couple of questions that I expect we each ask ourselves or have at some time in our life. Questions that help us understand, where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? First, is there a sentient force or forces that oversee and guide human existence? And if so, what is the nature of this God or godlike power? Second, are people inherently good, cooperative, and compassionate? Or are we innately selfish and prone to struggle and conflict? Why do good and evil occur? Third, what happens when we die? Is there something beyond, a reckoning of some sort? Fourth, is there reason to hold hope for the future? Why or why not? Where would we look to find sources of hope? Fifth, is there purpose or meaning to our lives? How do we know this? Now, these are stated simply, pretty much as binaries, and each question hides many deeper subtleties and nuances. But my contention is that we each hold models of how things work in our mind that address these traditionally religious notions, and that how we conceive of answers to these serves as a guide to how we live and experience our life. Now, in my initial thinking about this service, I was actually thinking about having people get into little groups and discuss certain ones of these, but I'm not going to do that because I got too many other things to say. The God question is probably the biggest of these, because if we believe that a force or forces beyond us engage in our lives, we must have some sense of how this manifests before we approach any of the other questions. In traditional religion, theology is the study of the nature and meaning of God, and it underlies all human meaning. If we believe a God is immanent, Understanding God and our relation to God is the fundamental question. Most of religious experience has been premised on knowing and interpreting our relation to God. In the Christian world, for example, we might seek salvation through God, although we still could argue about whether this is achieved best through acts of faith or through good works. And while some of us do, many of us do not focus on a personal God, whether we call ourselves atheists, agnostics, skeptics, humanists, naturalists, or something else. If we reject or at least set aside the notion of an active God, then we must find another set of criteria for addressing all of these other religious questions. And for the most part, these are not questions that can be readily addressed by science and reason alone. We do lean on science for explanations of where do we come from, maybe, by following the physicists and cosmology or evolutionary biology. But none of these other questions I have mentioned, including the God question itself, are clearly addressed using the scientific method. Are we inherently good or bad? Is there something beyond death? Do our lives have meaning and purpose? What sustains hope? These are all fundamentally matters of personal belief. So belief is central to all self-knowledge, whether we are believers, quote unquote, or not. Our beliefs are central to how we see the world, and if we haven't considered many of these questions seriously, we probably should. Now, there's no reason we need to hold the same beliefs on these or other questions. This is a familiar idea to use, as we have always understood the importance of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We strongly encourage our congregants to engage with each other over the content of their beliefs as a matter of learning and personal growth. But we should never posture that anyone's truth and beliefs are superior to another's, or that any set of beliefs is correct, except for mine. Mine are always correct. We know that what each of us believes as an individual matters far less than what we come to hold as most cherished as we work together. We are committed to ideals like justice and fairness in human affairs, and we share this commitment whether we believe in God or not. Historically, the word theology does refer to the study of God. I said that earlier. Greg said that earlier. However, in modern usage, the word is coming to mean much more than the study of a preconceived notion of some deity. Secularization in our world necessitates the reformulation of theology, because while we still seek ultimate causes, we do not necessarily still seek it through God. Now, the term theology might now be a misnomer, but we continue to use it because it represents what we seek to replace. We hope or need to construct a new normative theology as a way to collectively formulate spiritual reasons for what we do and to what we aspire. We still care about ultimate value. We just don't require it to be defined through a deity. Indeed, our new idea of theology is the approach by which we can discover, raise up, and act upon our shared ultimate values. It is useful for the individual, but it's even more useful for the group, the congregation, or any collective of persons. Practically, we hope that normative theology leads to action more than explanation, and that it effectively builds a center from which we can pursue justice-making and human growth and enrichment. It should become transcendent in that it pulls us towards the higher good and encourages us to strive towards embracing it in our world. Now, this new theology, whatever it will be, is very much a process, and it's best manifested in groups and collective situations through the creative interchange of thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. It is here that the traditional UU focus on the Enlightenment ideals of individual rights seems to have a bit of a downside. Individual rights are a moral imperative and are sacred in the minds of most of us. And none of us would question the importance of declaring the inherent worth and dignity of every person as a fundamental tenet in our moral order. Over the years, I frequently led some version of an old UU curriculum entitled Building Your Own Theology, and I did one here last year. The sessions were useful, and they helped lead many of us to engaging with these important questions of belief, as described before. We did discuss God concepts, human nature, the afterlife, and similar issues. And these talks, I think, were valuable to each of us. I know they've been valuable to me every time I've been through it. It was a good example about how positive creative interchange. Each of us honed our own beliefs while learning to entertain the diversity of ideas that others brought to the fore. The end product designed for this curriculum was for each person separately to create their own personal religious credo statement. And while this was a productive and useful project, I always ended up feeling that something was missing. We did good work in enhancing personal insight into our beliefs, but there was nothing that helped pull these together into something we could use to launch or support religious practice. In short, by focusing on the personal, we never broached a systematic theology that could guide us towards our future. And I probably shouldn't have used that word systematic, because to theologians it means something, and I don't know what that is. I think that a theological identity has to start with each person's belief, but that it grows richer as the individual shares and encounters other perspectives in the life of the group or community. This is because we learn to define ourselves through relationship as part of something larger than just ourselves. Often the goals of the individual must give way a bit or learn to harmonize with those of larger entities. We are always parts of larger groups, larger systems. And as individuals, we form beliefs and personal theologies. As members of groups, particularly as members of this congregation, what we can do is engage to co-create our own working normative theology, to build an understanding of what we hold to be ultimate values, and to participate in the sacred work of helping them become manifest in our world. This entails creative linkage between our deepest feelings and needs and the demands of the world we live in. We need to find what motivates us to work for justice in society, to fight racism, poverty, and all of the forces that marginalize and oppress persons in our midst. We must decide to resist attempts to steal human rights from some and fair government from all. And we must understand that we act in the ways we do because we are trying to live into our highest values and because we are committed to the personal and collective integrity and motivated by pursuing human goodness and improvement. I know that many of us have had some issue with the recent UUA actions that changed our foundational commitment from the traditional 7 principles to a new array of 6 human values, all centered around and based in love. Personally, it's starting to grow on me, apart from a number of squabbles about phrasing. But we always squabble about phrasing. And the main reason I feel this way is that I find the language of shared values much more conducive to supporting the creation of a new and normative theology. I think as much as the principles speak to our liberal heritage, that committing ourselves to values provides a better platform for supporting our aspirations and guiding a path into the future. These values, as named, are interdependence, pluralism, justice, transformation, generation, and equity. And they're all framed in love. Now, these words are a mouthful, and they don't just jump into our hearts and say, oh yeah. But as we work through and think through each one of them, I think they hold a lot of direct meaning. To me, these values echo the best of our religious heritage and our civil experience. They invoke the teachings of Jesus and the Buddha in all the best ways. We seek human flourishing for ourselves, for each other, and for all persons in the world around. We can only achieve this by internalizing our central values, by polishing them, by helping them spread and become available and salient to a much broader swath of humanity. We know that it is possible for persons of many beliefs to share in common purpose and to care deeply about the same thing. I assure you that contrary to much church teaching, it's very possible to be good without God. Over 450 years ago, the Transylvanian Unitarian Francis David said, "You don't need to believe alike in order to love alike." What he didn't tell us was how to teach the world how to love alike. This is what has to be the mission and purpose of a new UU theology. Somehow and however, we aspire to model and convey a shared love for humanity, first to ourselves and then to whoever we can touch. We must find a way to draw the circle wider and wider still, to convince all persons that we are in one family, that hatred and division are serious flaws, and that we share in common humanity, which is our most sacred possession. I'll close with these words by John Morgan. In the end, it won't matter how much we have, but how generously we have given. It won't matter how much we know, but rather how well we live. And it won't matter how much we believe, but how deeply we love. Amen. Blessed be Ashe.